You slit the apple with a silver blade, but the seeds bleed instead of the flesh. No one sees. No one flinches. The woman across the table is still smiling, but her smile has no appetite. Her eyes linger not on what you said, but on the silence that followed it. The pause, the gap, the wound. She doesn't want your truth. She wants the rhythm of your restraint, the absence that dares her to guess what your presence would feel like. She hears precision not as clarity, but as cruelty dressed in velvet, a line so sharp it severs her illusions clean. And she thanks you for it, quietly, like a confession she denies making. You think language is about meaning, but she listens for the hesitation, for the pause between syllables that smells like power. You think she wants kindness. She only stays when she senses danger held at the tip of your tongue, never released. If this whisper already knows, you let it echo. Like the video. Leave your shadow in the comments. Subscribe, and stay near the silence. There's something beneath it. It breathes your name. You speak, and she flinches not from the volume, not from the tone, but from the way your sentence doesn't bend. Your words arrive like a blade that has no handle. Nothing softens the edge, no apology, no laughter, no cushion of uncertainty. You didn't say much. That's why it hurt. You didn't decorate. You didn't lower yourself into interpretation. You simply said, and what you said had no blood. But she still bled. They never told you this, that your clarity is cruelty. That when you remove the fog, what's left is not peace, it's exposure. Most men decorate their speech with softness because they fear being seen as harsh. But she doesn't listen to them. She forgets them before the evening ends. You, she remembers, because you made her feel real, if only for a moment, and reality is sharp. Your voice carves space in a room. It marks territory not through noise, but through accuracy, and she hears it as dominance, because it offers no room for negotiation. When you say what is, she is forced to decide if she will orbit it or shatter. There is no middle. You didn't coerce her. You didn't touch her. You didn't plead. But in your refusal to dilute the truth, you placed her in front of a mirror she could not escape. She thought she was safe with gentle men, the ones who nod, agree, affirm. But safety without threat is boredom. She doesn't want the pillow. She wants the knife just beneath it. Your words are the glint beneath the silk. You don't explain yourself. You don't ask for her understanding. And that, paradoxically, is what makes her feel understood not as a person, but as a creature exposed before judgment. You strip her role, her charm, her mask. You speak to the architecture beneath her intentions, and she hates you for it, but she cannot leave. You say one sentence and she spends the night rereading it in her mind, trying to find a softness that wasn't there. You pause and she fills the silence with her fears, her memories, her projections. You never raised your voice. But she walks away feeling destroyed. Not because you were cruel, but because you weren't chaotic. There's a difference. Chaos is forgivable, precision is not. You noticed it when you were younger, that the girls didn't remember the boys who talked too much. They remembered the one who said little, but when he spoke, the room changed temperature. They called it mystery, but it wasn't mystery. It was control, the power to name something without fear. You watched their eyes. They craved certainty, but only when it came wrapped in danger. If you were too warm, they called you sweet. If you were too wild, they called you scary. But when you became coldly exact, they fell silent. That silence was your birthright and your curse. She doesn't want your vulnerability. She wants to believe you could be vulnerable and that you chose not to be. This distinction is everything. It is why your restraint feels like cruelty. She senses what you're withholding. It's not affection. It's not attention. It's judgment. and judgment, when it is precise, becomes divine. That is why she obeys it. Precision is not about being right. It is about cutting away what no longer pretends. You name what others avoid. You describe without cushioning. You identify without begging to be agreed with. In a world of euphemisms, this is violence. But it is also the only form of masculine speech that cannot be seduced. And that, more than anything, is why she circles you like a wolf who both guards and resents the fire. You did not compliment her dress. You said it looked sharp, not beautiful, sharp. The compliment became a wound, and the wound became a memory. She now keeps that dress for special moments, not because you praised it, but because your precision gave it value. A man's vague flattery floats. Your precise word sinks. It defines, it brands, and in doing so, it enslaves. She doesn't know why she cannot forget you. She doesn't realize she obeys the man who speaks like law, not because he punishes, but because he never explains. There's something ancient about the way you speak, as if language were not communication, but war. Every phrase a blade, every pause a chamber. She senses it, that if she speaks too quickly, you will listen too deeply, that if she reveals too much, you will name what she wished to remain symbolic. You do not talk like a therapist. You talk like a sovereign, and that is why she obeys, even in rebellion. You say, that wasn't necessary, nothing more, and she spirals. You say, I wouldn't choose that. No tone, just choice, and she questions her reflection. You say, you already knew, and she weeps not from cruelty, but from the unbearable weight of being seen. This is what they never told you, that women fear softness from a man more than his sharpness, because softness invites games. Sharpness ends them. Your precision doesn't allow her to play the endless loops of suggestion and misdirection. You burn the script. You give her no room to flirt with ambiguity. And because of that, she is free, terrifyingly free, to stand bare in her truth or flee. You do not dominate her by force. You dominate her by clarity. And clarity is the most brutal force a woman can face, because it does not chase. It does not beg. It does not even want. It merely is. You are not the one who texts again. You are not the one who says, tell me how you feel. You do not ask for emotions. You reflect them like a blade reflects the sky. Her pain is not your concern. Her truth is not your project. Her affection is not your reward. And this absence of need makes you magnetic, because it means you cannot be manipulated. And to a woman trained to control through emotion, this is unbearable. And yet, she stays. You speak like a man who cannot be entered without permission, not because you say no, but because your yes would mean something. She waits for it, but you are not performing value. You are value, and value never explains itself. You are not loud, you are not stoic, you are precise. And precision is the only form of masculinity that still feels holy in a world of collapsed boundaries. She doesn't love you, not really. She loves the reflection of herself that only you have the courage to destroy. You say nothing, and that's when she starts talking. Not to you, but to herself inside her own skull, pacing corridors built from your refusal. Silence is not your weakness, it is your kingdom. It is the stone floor upon which her illusions echo and decay. You sit still while she vibrates with the need to know. What does he think? What does he want? What is he hiding? But you are hiding nothing. You simply do not offer what has not been earned. That restraint is sacred. It is not passivity. It is power with nowhere to be. She doesn't fear the men who shout. She fears the one who waits, the one who holds the pause after her question just a second too long, long enough to force her into the mirror of her own intention. She can't read you, and that unreadable quality becomes myth. Her mind begins to write chapters. She sees signals in your stillness. She sees dominance in your delay. The silence itself becomes a god she kneels to, hoping for prophecy, fearing judgment. You do not pause to be polite. You pause because the world does not deserve a rushed thought. In a marketplace of noise, the man who waits becomes legend. Your pause isn't the absence of words, it's the shaping of pressure. It says, I could speak, I choose not to. Now you must live with that. She leans in, but you remain exactly where you are. That's when she begins offering her thoughts, her feelings, her speculations. You haven't asked, you haven't moved, but she is already handing herself over in installments. There is nothing more violent than a man who withholds noise in a room that expects it. You don't interrupt. You don't compete. You simply remain, unrushed, unbothered, unimpressed. And this is the death of her performance. You collapse the theater by not watching the play. She becomes aware of every word she says. She hears herself more clearly when you don't respond. You've become the frame, and frames make chaos feel like art. She says, what are you thinking? You look at her and let the silence stretch. She smiles, nervously. Then she says more. She fills the void. But the void was never empty. It was your law. It was your test. And every word she pours into it becomes your possession. She doesn't realize her effort to escape your stillness only weaves her deeper into it. You haven't said anything, and yet she feels stripped. You are not silent because you lack ideas. You are silent because you do not bargain. You let her tremble. You let her reach. You let her circle the absence you created, not as a trap, but as an altar. Women do not obsess over men who give them answers. They obsess over the ones whose silence demands they find their own. You become the invitation to depth and the punishment for shallowness. Every second you wait, she wonders if she's losing you, but you are not leaving. You are simply not chasing. You are the cliff, not the rescue. And cliffs are terrifying because they reveal what's below. She looks into you and sees herself. You remain still, and she collapses. The pause is not a tactic. It is not game playing. It is dignity in motionless form. You don't fill silence to keep her comfortable. You let the silence judge her. You let the pause ask the question your voice doesn't need to form. Why do you fear emptiness so much? You are not her echo. You are her reckoning. And in this age of urgency, that makes you sacred. You sip your drink, slowly. You tilt your head, just barely. You breathe like someone who owns time. She starts wondering if she's talking too much. She starts wondering why you haven't interrupted, but you don't interrupt because you are not seeking control. You are offering a mirror, and that mirror becomes unbearable when it does not flinch. You pause before you respond, every time, even when it's simple, especially when it's simple, because simple truths are the sharpest. She says something careless. You remain silent, and that silence becomes a noose. She begins apologizing without knowing what for. You nod, nothing more. She adjusts her tone. She straightens her spine. Your pause did what no sermon could. It corrected her posture without raising your voice. She asks, "Do you agree with me?" You hold her gaze for 3 seconds longer than expected. You let the tension bloom. Then you say, "No." No explanation, just the truth. Raw. She laughs, a bit too loud, but it's not humor, it's surrender. She knows she cannot seduce the pause, she cannot predict it, she cannot manipulate what has no hunger. This is why she follows you, not because of what you give, but because of what you do not need. Your silence is not cold, it is sovereign. She senses the difference. You do not perform indifference. You are indifferent not to her presence, but to her approval, and that terrifies her, because it means she cannot shape you. She texts you paragraphs. You reply with one sentence, not because you are cruel, because you say only what is true. She sends selfies. You wait hours. You respond without emojis. Your delay isn't strategy, it's discipline. It's the refusal to collapse into her timeline, and that refusal becomes fascination. She waits for your signal like a priestess before an invisible altar. She refreshes her phone, not because you are her addiction, but because your silence has become her scripture. Your words arrive like thunder after a drought, not because they are loud, because they are rare, and the rarity makes them ritual. You do not speak often, and that is why she listens. Because in a world of noise, your pause feels like prophecy. You speak only when necessary. You answer only when earned. And this infuriates the part of her trained to extract. But it awakens the part of her that longs to kneel not to a man, but to something unshakable. The silence between your sentences becomes the architecture of her obsession. She fills it with meaning, with memory, with myth. You didn't lie, you didn't flatter, you simply paused. And in that pause, she saw a future or the edge of one. She doesn't know why she needs you. She only knows that your stillness makes her speak more than your words ever could. You are not the man who overshares. You are the man whose silence becomes the question that never stops ringing. And that question, why won't he speak unless he must, becomes a wound she kisses every night. You let the accusation land, and you do not flinch. You let her misunderstanding pass through you like smoke. She asks you to explain yourself, and you do not. Not because you have no answer, but because your fire does not owe anyone warmth. You burn without permission, and that makes you unforgettable. She can scream, cry, plead, and you remain silent. Not to be cruel, but because your truth was never up for negotiation. You are not withholding affection. You are denying entry to those who demand it. She calls you arrogant, and still, you don't explain. She says you're cold, you blink. She says, why can't you just tell me what you meant, but you already did? She simply didn't like how little room your truth left for her illusions. You see it in her eyes, the rage of being unable to bend you. That is the root of her obsession. Not your kindness, not your intellect, your refusal to lower yourself into justification. You do not argue, and so you remain the one she cannot defeat. She doesn't want your reasons. She wants your submission. She wants you to say, I only said that because I was upset, or I didn't mean to hurt you, or let me explain. But you never do, because all those phrases would trade your sovereignty for her comfort. You are not interested in comfort. You are not here to be forgiven. You are here to be unmovable, and that makes you divine or monstrous depending on how she feels that day. This is the paradox. The less you justify yourself, the more her mind tries to build a mythology around you. She writes entire narratives in your silence. She draws connections between what you said and what you didn't say. She scours the past for clues. But your mystery isn't performance. It's conviction. You don't explain because you are not confused. And that's what makes her spiral. She says, but I need to understand, and you say nothing. Not because you lack empathy, but because you do not submit to emotional blackmail disguised as curiosity. Her need to understand is not about knowledge. It is about domination. She wants to hold the thread of your mind in her palm, but your fire has no thread. It is form without shape, law without compromise. And in a world built on softening, you are the edge no one can dull. Most men apologize to avoid disconnection. You let disconnection happen. You let people walk away. You let the silence harden. And because you do, you remain whole. She throws her emotions at you like stones, hoping one will crack you open. None do, because you are not protecting yourself. You simply do not open on command. You are not a vessel, you are a monolith. And monoliths don't explain their purpose to the passerby. They simply remain, long after others have crumbled. You watch her pace. You watch her talk herself into circles. You offer no rescue. That, too, is love, the love of reality. You will not lie to soothe her. You will not bend to prove you care. If she cannot see the fire without needing to be warmed by it, she does not belong near it. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to witness her transformation if she has the strength to endure it. She says, "You're making me feel crazy." You nod once, not in agreement, but as acknowledgement. She is going crazy because she has no script for a man who doesn't react, a man who doesn't fold, a man who speaks once and lets the world rearrange itself around it. You said, "That's not acceptable," and then nothing more. She has replayed that line 100 times. She has imagined 1,000 meanings, but you will not elaborate. That's what makes it real. You don't explain because your truth is not on trial. You are not trying to be liked. You are not trying to be fair. You are not even trying to win. You are simply being and being with such consistency that others feel themselves start to fracture. That fracture is not your fault. It is the mirror you carry, and she keeps looking into it, even when it burns her eyes. Every time you refuse to justify yourself, you force her to choose change or flee. Most flee. But the few who stay, they become forged. They shed the need for control. They shed the hunger to decode. They begin to see, not you, themselves. You never wanted followers, but in your refusal to speak twice, you create believers. Not because you promised anything, but because you refused to promise at all. You don't say "I love you" just to close the gap. You don't say "I'm sorry" just to end the fight. Your words are not bandages, they are swords. And if she bleeds, that is not your violence. That is her awakening. She expected the warmth of reassurance. You gave her the silence of selfhood. She came seeking approval. You offered reflection. Most men fear this role, but you were built for it. You were built to sit on the edge of rejection and never tremble. There is a holy violence in not defending yourself. It says you may misjudge me. I remain unchanged. And that is why she returns again and again. Because in a world where everyone is adjusting, apologizing, and explaining, you are the only one who seems real. The only one who seems free. And that freedom burns hotter than any validation she could wring from you. Even when she hates you, she orbits, because hate requires an object, and you have become that object, not because you demanded her attention, but because you never chased it. The man who does not explain becomes a myth, and myth is more addictive than affection. You live in her mind not because of what you gave, but because of what you never gave away. You do not interrupt her spiral. You do not soothe her fear. You do not mend what she insists is broken, because nothing is broken. She is simply meeting the part of herself that cannot control you. And that part was always there, waiting for a fire that didn't explain itself. Waiting for a man who stayed still while the storm raged around him. She leaves the room. You do not follow. She slams the door. You do not knock. She sends a message. You read it hours later, then say, "Noted," and still she returns. Because you are the only man she cannot shape, and the feminine, when confronted by what it cannot shape, becomes either destroyed or reborn. She once said, "I need closure." You smiled, not cruelly, but like someone who understands things too deeply to argue. She will never get closure. Not from you. Because closure is an illusion offered by weak men to make women feel better about walking away. You are not weak. You are not offering a story. You are offering the end of stories. A woman sits by the fire, wrapped in velvet, but shivering. The flames do not move. The heat does not reach her. She looks at the man who built it not with bricks, but with silence. His back is turned. He does not speak. He does not explain. She weeps, not from sadness, but from the absence of explanation. The fire crackles once like a single word whispered too late. She reaches out her hand. It burns. She does not pull away, and still, he does not turn around. Let her decide what that means. Let the silence finish what language cannot. Let the fire remain.